I think one of the big challenges that some teachers are actually having in the classroom, it is to actually have children settle down, pay attention to what is going on. It seems like the curriculum do it may many times be just what can be done within a school term, yet teachers find themselves having to either rush through the material at the end or probably not finishing the material at all. And with close observations, what some teachers are actually saying is that it is very difficult or presenting more and more challenge to actually have students sit down, pay attention, or even if they are sitting and appearing to pay attention, they are more or less not focused, or they may become very inattentive. When I was actually in school, and for a number of you who probably listening to what I'm saying right now, you may have recalled it was a little easier to sit and listen to what Miss or Sir had to say, or what they were teaching, or if they were writing something on the board, it was a little easy to copy down what they were writing because they will have you either stay on task, and whatever method they were using, it seems like it may have been just enough to get you to focus, as well as you too may have had less distractions, less activities vying for your attention, so it was a little easier to focus in many instances. Today, however, it seems like it's a little challenge for some of our students to focus, to pay attention, to participate when the need arises without having to say, they don't understand what's going on, or what is going on is really boring, it's not entertaining, it's not catching their attention. This distraction, it seems, it is to the point where even within the classroom, not only are they inattentive or appearing to pay attention, but not having the information impact them very much, but they themselves are actually now acting out. They may be involved in talking within among themselves when a teacher is actually teaching the subject matter, looking back, turning around, throwing paper at each other, or sending messages to each other. And another thing too has to do with the use of technology. A number of our nation's children are actually having access to cell phones and other type of devices that they can easily send information to each other, and that too is presenting a challenge in the classroom. So not only are they saying what is being taught at a specific time is not getting their attention or keeping their attention, but they are now within the school environment and able to do something else that can keep their attention. But that which they are using to keep their attention, it is not actually contributing to their education in terms of the subject matter at that particular time. So it's becoming, or it has been, a distraction for them and continues to be a distraction for them. In addition to using the technology to text or to talk to each other, we now have these smart devices, the tablets or the cell phones, that pictures, we say pictures paint 1,000 words. Well, it is true for the child's mind, in that looking at a picture of probably an event one of their school friends attended, or maybe it's a party, or maybe it was some kind of social activity, and they took a picture and they sent it around the classroom or sent it around the school or the campus, and that is actually more entertaining for a child than having to sit in a classroom and listen to a teacher in their minds ramble on about mathematics or geography or social studies. And what I often say to teachers too is the fact that the techniques that are used, not the subject matter in itself, because the teacher may be that expert when it comes to the subject matter. They know their work. They have been to universities, they have been to the colleges, and you know exactly what you have to teach. But what I often say to teachers is that the techniques that you may use to transfer that information, or the techniques that you may use to reinforce what you're teaching, so as to help it that piece of information to stick in the student's mind, that may be where the deficit may also lie. So in addition to students being distracted easily, talking to each other, turning around, probably throwing paper, passing information to each other, being on their cell phones, texting, or looking at pictures, or maybe on some social media. The techniques that the teachers are actually using to teach might also be reinforcing the behavior or the unwanted behavior in the classroom, and that in itself creates a distraction. So one of the suggestions I will always give a teacher is look at the techniques that you're using and make sure that it is not reinforcing the unwanted behavior in the classroom. So simple things like letting a child or letting your students know exactly why they are doing a particular task. We sometimes tend to think that we are simply here to teach the subject matter, and it's not necessary for me to say to the students why this is important, how it can be used in the real world. Granted, there are some subject matters that one student may find it very applicable in their world because they may have already been either exposed to it, or they have a family member that probably uses that particular subject matter to get their job done, and therefore that student will better be able to relate with what that teacher is teaching. But there are some students who will not be able to relate easily with that information unless they are shown exactly how it can be used or told how it could be used in the real world, and that may actually act as a method to keep their attention. Another technique that I often talk about has to do with the use of rules and consequences. We tend to give a lot of rules to our children. Don't do this, don't do that. But there's a lot of don'ts and not necessarily what we want them to do. Now, it may sound a little strange because here it is. If I tell you, don't speak when I'm teaching unless a question is asked and you have to give a response, you may think that that is pretty straightforward. But it's also important that we think in terms of the way in which we phrase our questions, or not just questions, but the way we phrase the rule that we want to have in our classroom. So the rule can be, when I ask a question, I will like participation. So instead of saying, when I ask a question, don't be quiet, it's easier to say, when I ask a question, I would like to have participation. Very similar. Don't talk when I am speaking. Don't be texting on your cell phone. Don't be looking at pictures. You can rephrase those rules by saying something like this: I would like you to use your cell phones another time besides during class period. Now, it may mean that there's a lot of extra words that you may have to use, and this will work well for the older students. For the younger ones, instead of using the don'ts, you can use pictures instead. So you can have a picture of a cell phone, and you can have the words during class, you have the picture of the cell phone, and you can put an X over the cell phone picture. So that in itself will indicate to them, and you let them know as well. Let them know that this X over the picture of the cell phone means that during this period of time in the class, it is not what I want you to do, that is, to be using your cell phone. Also too, it's important that you let the student know of the consequences. All too often, we set these rules, and they may be very elaborate, they may sound really good, they may even look good on paper, but with the absence of consequences, it's a little difficult for a student to look at or to follow these rules, and when these rules are broken or breached, to now be expected to accept a consequence that they may not have been aware of before. So it's also or equally important that in addition to having those rules or consequences, rules rather, that you have consequences too, to help that student to understand that if you break this rule, this is or these are the consequences that, as the one who has the authority in the class, I can have these consequences. I can use these consequences rather if you break these rules. So it is really important that we have the rules, but we have the consequences. Because if we have rules and they are broken, and then we make up the consequences on the spot, what can happen is that many times or oftentimes when these rules are broken, the consequences may vary, and students tend to look at the consequences that one child may have had to endure and then measure it against the consequence that they have to endure. And if it seems unfair, they may even let you know, and sometimes they may let you know in a very disrespectful or in a very harsh way. And they may very well be confused as well as to why one student seemed to have gotten away while they have to suffer a more harsh or harsher consequence than that other student. And it could also breed an appearance of favoritism, which clearly may not have even been your intention at the onset. And this in itself can actually contribute to reinforcing some behaviors, because some children may say, well, you know what, if I cannot behave in a way that Miss can find pleasing, and when I don't, Miss or Sir is very upset or very aggressive with me, and if there are rules, they simply just let me know that I broke this rule and this is the consequence. And on another occasion, someone breaks a rule, and the outward show of frustration is different. Then the student can look at it and simply say that there was some kind of favoritism or biasness on your part. So again, think in terms of your classroom management and see ways in which you can improve, always paying close attention to yourself and to see that you are not contributing in any way to reinforcing some of the behaviors that the child may actually be engaging in. So again, this was another episode of the Behaviorist Guy, and I hope you enjoy your teaching, and see you next time.